In this tutorial, I'm going to be covering how to create a test. So you can create a test directly from inside your learning units. To do that, all you would have to do is hover over Assessment and click on Test. Now, if you have existing tests in the course, you can also select one of those and add that to a content area. There is another way that you can create a test. You can also do that via the course tools, the test surveys and pools, and then click on tests. From this particular area, you can also import tests, or you can click the build test. So if you're importing a test, say you built a test from a third-party software and you would like to import it, you could actually import that test here, and then you could add it to the content area. For these purposes, I'm going to go ahead and just build the test inside the learning units. So I'm going to go back into my content area. I want to go back into my week 1 assignments. And I'm going to hover over assessments and I'm going to click on test. And I actually just want to go ahead and create a brand new test. So I'm going to go ahead and name my week 1 my exam. In the description, this is where I'm going to put how much time the students are going to have on the exam, what the specific exam is going to be covered. So all of that you want to add into the description and the instructions. And you'll also have the option to show the instructions to the students before they start. So I highly recommend filling out these areas so that way the students will know what they're covering and they'll know their instructions for this particular test. So once you've named it, you'll go ahead and click Submit. Now it's time to either create a question or reuse a question. So you can create your own questions. You can do multiple choice is probably the most popular, and true false. You also have the option to do essay. I'm just going to click on a few of these to kind of show you what it would look like. So for our essay, we would just put in the question text, and then you can provide an answer. You don't have to, because you're still going to have to go back in and manually grade it anyway. And then once you have created your question, let's just do an example. See, now I've got my question created and I've got the amount of points. I can also do multiple choice. And so for this one, I could ask something along the lines of economics. I could say, you know, what are macroeconomics? And then in my answers, I could select 4 different types of answers. The check bubble, the bubble here, that's going to check for what the actual correct answer. So you want to make sure your correct answer is wherever that bubble is. You can also leave question feedback. So if a student gets the question wrong, you can say check page 237 in the textbook. So that way you can direct them to actually go back and learn and find where they went wrong. And so you've got the correct response feedback, I'm sorry, and the incorrect. So if they've got the correct response, you can put, you know, you got the question correct. If they've got it wrong, like I said, you can direct them to other materials to help clarify whatever concept that was in. And then once you've done that, then you'll just click Submit. Or you can also click Submit and create another one, and that will take you right back to a blank multiple choice question. And then you've also got the option to do true false. So you've just got your question text, and then what you'll do is you'll select which is the answer, the true or the false. You've got your response feedback for the correct or the incorrect, and then again you can just click submit or submit and create another one. You also have the option to do a file response where students submit like a paper to you. So say they don't have access to a file, they download a file, and then they type in it, and then they resubmit to that file response. So you can do like a timed response, but it's not necessarily a test like you would, like a multiple test. You've also got the option to do matching, multiple answer, and then another popular one is short answer. You have to be very careful with the short answer and the fill in the blank and the fill in the multiple blanks, because it's really important that you go back and review them, because sometimes students may misspell something. They may have correct answer, but they may misspell it, or say, for instance, they capitalize the letter and you lowercase the letter. So it's really important to go back in when you're grading those attempts and check and make sure that they got that either correct or incorrect. Now, if you've got questions from a publisher, now I highly recommend, if you're going to use publisher questions, please go back and reword the questions. You can edit questions. The reason being is students tend to use these to create flashcards, and so we want to minimize the students cheating on their tests. So a good way to do that is, you may like a question, but go in and reword it, or maybe put 2 or 3 questions together and make an essay question. There's different things that you can do that make it harder for a student to go in and copy and paste that question. There is also a no copy, no print code that you can put into the test that will block students from being able to highlight text and paste it other places. So that's another way to kind of help minimize cheating. But if you have created your own questions and say you want to reuse your questions for a comprehensive final, you can do a question set, or you can create a random block. I would recommend doing a random block. And what I recommend doing, because I've got so many questions that I can pull from, is I may pull from multiple areas, and it's just going to pull a bunch of different questions from there, and then I can tell it how many questions I want to pull. So if I submit, oh, you know what, looks like there may not be questions in that one. Let's just do this one. There we go, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, those weren't good pulls. I'm sorry about that. So I can now designate, it's going to pull out of all of those pool questions. It's got 221 is a possibility. We'll say I only want to pull 20 questions, and I go ahead and click submit. Now all of my students are going to be getting different questions. So one student will get 20 sets of questions, and the student sitting next to them make 20 completely different sets of questions. And this is another thing that kind of helps minimize students cheating, students working together. You can also preview the questions that can be looked at. You can remove some if you don't like them. And like I said, all of that is completely up to you. It's going to be your test. So, please feel free to go in and play around with that. You can also change the point value as well. So if you don't want it to be out of 200 total points, say you want to do, let's select both of our questions and say we only want them to be worth 2 points. I can update that. And so that'll be worth 2 points because it's one question, and then my random block, which is 20 questions, is going to be worth 40. So that's how you can kind of go in and make changes and get a good solid 100 number for when you're trying to create your exam. And then once your test built, then what you would do is you go back into your learning units, And I'm going to go back into my assignments. And I'm going to hover over assessments. I'm going to click test. And see, now I've got my week 1 exam here. And I can click submit. And now it's going to give me the option to select what test options I want. So if I want to make the link available to students, if I want to give if I want to give multiple attempts, if I want to do forced completion, which I do not recommend. I don't recommend using this setting. The way this is worded is confusing. If a student has any kind of internet disruption through no fault of their own, if you have this option set, it's going to kick them out of the exam and they can't get back in. And then it just ends up being a lot more of it becomes a bigger problem than it would have been if you'd have just left it unchecked. Then you have the option to set a timer, which I highly recommend doing. You can put the auto submit on. If you're worried about them going over and you absolutely don't want them to go over, you could have them auto submit. It's going to still submit their exam at the end of the time, but then they won't be in it for a really long amount of time. Or you can have it set to off, but what will happen is when the student submits the exam, if they've gone over the time, then it will give you the yellow circle with the exclamation, and that will denote that it went over time. And it'll also say that it went over time when you go to grade. And then you've got your display after and display until. If you were going to do a proctored exam, you would put a password here. If you need to give a student additional time for ADA purposes, so I would find that student on my list, I'd click submit, and instead of 60 minutes, they're supposed to get 90 minutes. So now that student has additional time. It's important to note that if you don't check options up here, then they won't be available down here. So whatever is displayed up here, that's what's going to be down here. And then, like I said, you've got your due date. I don't necessarily recommend this bottom setting. I would put the due date on there, and then you can just hide the test from students, because as long as the test is hidden, students won't be able to get into it. And sometimes if people forget to uncheck that, and so then you have a student trying to get in and they can't get in, and it can be confusing. But I definitely recommend using the due date because, again, that goes to the calendar. I don't recommend messing with either of these settings. This will tell it to not include in the grade center calculations, and this will completely hide the test from you. And we have to go to Blackboard to have it unhidden. And we have to be really careful because it can delete all temps. I have seen that happen where it deleted all the temps and there was nothing Blackboard could do. They couldn't recover it. Another thing that I bring up when we talk about cheating is if you just have a multiple choice test, leave after submission here and then everything else unchecked. And then on this second rule, what you want to do is say after all attempts are graded, then you can actually show them the answers, the correct, what they got submitted. So say if this was a true, false, and a multiple choice, they would automatically get their score. But then once you have gone in and graded the rest of the attempts or the other students have taken the exam, then they would be able to see the feedback for the test. One important thing about this is you have to go back in and assign 0 for any student that has not completed that test. And then for test presentation, you've got the option to do all at once, one at a time. You can randomize questions or prohibit backtracking. I only recommend using prohibit backtracking if you have some kind of certification that's going to require it. And if you do have it selected, make sure that students know they cannot click that back button, because what happens is it can skip a question if they click the back button, and you don't want them, just clicking it a bunch of times because it's not working, and them not realizing that it's actually skipping questions. But then once you've got all your settings and you're happy with the way that looks, then you just click send. Oh, I need to adjust my start date. And now I've got my week 1 exam is ready to go. And I can tell that it's hidden from, that the students can't see it because it's kind of grayed out. Plus, it will actually tell me that it was last available today at 9:13.